te Māori community a te kaunihiro ahiriri. Ko te mea tuatai kia ino I tātou. Ka tā ki nā te kaua, ko te kaua nui, ko te kaua roa, ko te kaua whakatikitika, humai noa, tiki o te rangi. Kia te puake ko te pū, ko te wē, ko te rito, ko te pūkinga, ko te wānanga, ko te more, ko te take, ko te taura, ko te tauera. A tēnā te awhinuku, te awhirangi, nā te pū ororo I a matua kore. He pū I aki te takitaku e nuku e rangi. Kia huaua mai te rongo, ki runga ki te tipua, ki runga ki te tāwhito, ki runga ki te kāhui o ngā āriki, kia puta tēnei hui ki te whaiao ki te ao mārama. Tūturu ofi te whakamaua kia teina.
Teina.
Haumi e hui e.
Yeah.
Ko te mea tuatahi, ka rere atu ana te mihi mahana tēnei kia ki a tātou kai whakahaere honanga Māori, kōrua whai Bev, kōrua ko whai Hillary, tēnā kōrua nau mā haere mai ki tēnei o ngā hui a te community Māori a te kaunihiro o Ahiriri. Kia koutou katoa, huri no I tō tātou nei whare a tāhua, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. Kia ora te whānau. Firstly, before we get into our hui, just to let you guys know that this meeting will be live streamed for the first time today. So if you guys are on Facebook and friends with Napier City Council, you can probably find the live stream on the council Facebook page. Next, we've got apologies. I've received apologies from Mayor Wise, Renee Brown and Robbie Paul. I'll put that these apologies be accepted. Do I have a second? Kia ora te kaha. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Kia ora. Kua mana. No conflicts of interest today. Public forum, we do have someone wishing to speak. Graham Duncan. Do I have Graham Duncan? Kia ora, Graham. Do you want to please come forward and the floor is yours.
Over here, Mr. Chair, down there.
Yeah, anywhere you want. Wherever you feel comfortable.
With respect, can I just pass these two around?
Yep, thank you. So we have Graham Duncan, Stephen Dayshed, sorry.
Kia ora, Paul Bailey.
Oh, kia ora, Paul. Kia ora.
And can I just note an apology from John Clark of the Tonkin Taylor group. So he would have loved to have been here, but thank you for that. Well, first up,
there's a speaker to...
Oh, yeah, no.
Oh, good. As I say, my name's Graham Duncan. Just by way of introduction, with these two gentlemen beside me, I don't think they really need any introduction. They've been here quite often, I would suggest. How are you, Richard? I hail from the Nelson Marlborough area, and I came first, my foray to Hawke's Bay was in 1989 with the manager of the Marriott Group of companies, and also spent a lot of time in the development of Kiwi Bank when it got established here on the East Coast. Worked in a number of public and private companies and management roles, but it's great to get back to Hawke's Bay. I spent some time in Auckland and then came back to Hawke's Bay, and I've been here ever since. This particular project, as we now know it as the Ahuriri Rock Pools Development Trust, is something that I've been working away on for now 3 years now. I'm absolutely delighted to have the invitation to come here and meet with you. I've looked forward to this. It was important with the stages that we've been going through to be able to deliver to you something professional and has a structure of credibility, and most importantly, something that we can work together on in a partnership moving forward. So we do have a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll talk to those as we go through. I'll just go through the early stages of this, and Stephen will also talk a wee bit about the pathway forward, the nature of our funding sources that we're looking to, and do obviously some valuable question and answer time at the end. For a start, if we can, we've got someone to push the button there for us. If I can just follow these through with you. When I spent quite a lot of time in Sydney, and I looked at the Bondi pools for quite some time in their operation, and I could see some synergies in their coastal development, and in particular the Ahuriri coastline, of how we could look at improving that quite dramatically. A very valuable asset for our community, our whānau. And I did spend a wee bit of time talking with Peter Gluckman, and he made it very clear to me that Napier really needed to identify a larger ticket item, something that would be an attraction to families, attracting people to our region, but most importantly, having a facility that was going to provide health and safety, looking after the environment. He pointed out very clearly there was a need for the protection plans for any coastal erosion, and also then looking at future proofing. And much of the fundamentals that he talked to me about were very much part and parcel with our development. So I caught up, after I've been working on the project for a while, with Lance Titter, the city services manager, and he said to me, you know, Dunk, there was a rock pool started in Hawke's Bay, particularly at the Ahuriri site that we're looking at, and that was undertaken by, oh gosh, name slips my mind. Ivan Wilson, sorry. And the council gave me the full report that was established there, and he spent some time with Ian Dick and also 2 or 3 of the other city fathers, but mostly a lot of the Napier cadets. And they started a rock pool project there and built some round donut-shaped rocks, and you've probably seen them outside the Boardwalk restaurant there. There's actually 52 of those stones. Now that picture in the top left-hand corner, the rocks that they started building that pool with, they were built out of concrete with hessian bags designed to rot away and leave a pool structure. Sadly, 2 weeks into the project, poor old Ivan passed away. So in a way, it sort of said to me, this is our golden chalice here to follow on that legacy of what he started. So it gave us the energy to keep moving forward on that. The Spriggs Park area is part of the big theme park development, and we'll touch on that a wee bit later as to how we can bring that into the program as well. As far as Stephen's concerned, he spent a lot of time in the coastal development with Tongoia to Clifton development, and that experience that he has had with that project is a valuable asset, along with the work that John Clark has done with Tonkin Taylor and this 4-year contractual work with the councils and also the Napier Port development.
Could I just interrupt? Sorry. Sorry. Mr. Chair, I'm just checking on time. We've got 5 or 6 slides to work through. And I know that...
So you got 10 minutes, which we're about halfway through that now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we might just spin through them quite quickly.
Yes, I just want to say that the Clifton to Tongoia coastal, that was a community-led MCDA process, and the bottom image shows that certainly over time that whole Ahuriri area is quite prone to coastal erosion and inundation. through sea level rise. So this is a pretty key element of this project to provide a functional structure that would fulfil those requirements.
Yep. Okay, so if we can move the next slide over, thank you. If you can just follow that through with me. The new charitable trust deed has been completed and has been registered, and I do have copies of the certificate of incorporation which I'll leave with you, so you know the entity of that has now been established. Peter Twigg, the solicitor with Langley Twigg, has been appointed as our special trust advisor, and he's working very closely with us on our developments. I might say he's absolutely delighted to be involved with this. With the trust that we've established, we have made provision to make arrangements for 2 Māori trustee representatives, and we'll possibly also look fairly soon to get a representative from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council as part of our team. And I'll go through very briefly with the trustees who have been appointed. So we'll move on. Very much a family-focused recreation, health and tourism benefit, as we have said. We think it's critical to be able to develop something that is safe for our region here. Some have said to me, well, we've got the big pools now out at Napier on the highway, but this is Napier. We don't have many safe places to swim, and we've looked to create a 50-metre saltwater pool with seating that's been developed for the Erebus monument up in Auckland that will work very well with what we're planning. There's a heated 25-metre pool, which is there for senior citizens and children. Clearly, we want to be able to do something that's quite unique for this area, and I've done a lot of research work with Sam Trubridge, who created the laser fountain with a projector down to Orange Parade in Wellington. And he and his family trust want to get involved with this and do something with us there. That the other bits there you can see is just part and parcel of that.
Just from a family and a health point of view, I've been living here for 25 years, growing up a bunch of kids. The lack of safe swimming opportunities, safe in terms of somewhere that you're not going to be pulled out into the ocean, but also from pollution, Pandora Pond, it's a great asset, but it's going to take a long time for the council and the community to solve those water quality issues. There is nowhere that I know that is safe and healthy within Napier City to swim. These little beaches around the Sahara is the closest we can get. So to me, and the health of salt water is hugely important. It sounds like we're out of our time. Yes, okay. You want to go through the next slide?
Yep, please.
You might want to skip over this, don't you?
Yeah, very quickly you can read through those, and we've touched on most, if not all, of those things. We'll talk very briefly about the opportunities with a information centre. So then there is just an image of a ballerina on Orange Parade in Wellington. Very blurry because of its size, but that's 14 metres high, and we'll have a series of images that will be displayed on that fountain. Thank you. That's something that we would like to spend some time on a wee way down the track, but this is an initiative to create an information centre out by Perfume Point. It has been designed as a scallop shell, and I have been pointed out that we don't have scallops here. And well done, sir. So off the cuff, we've now called it a cockle, and there's a women's group now calling themselves the Cockle Club that want to get involved with this, which is very healthy. So it's got a raking roof because of the aquarium design roof, and that's the reason why I've designed it that way. But if you just skim through the left, you'll be able to read quickly the various factors that will be built into that as time moves on. Thank you. This is very much the key. It's creating a partnership with you, the Napier City Council, and most definitely the community. Thank you.
Can I add something?
Yeah, sure.
There were three. Thank you. There were three particular questions I wanted to focus on in terms of the partnership with Mana Whenua. One is asking: is there anything in that locale that we need to know about in terms of are there any toes we're going to tread on, or any stories that we need to know about before we proceed with the project? Are there any enhancements which would improve the Māori of the area that we haven't considered that could be included in the project? I think that would be really cool. And the other one would be if we could put our heads together and perhaps come up with a name with the facility when it's completed. I think that would be. I'm certainly we're open to suggestions on that one. I think it'd be really cool if we had an area which reflects the location.
Thank you.
With your indulgence, there was one more slide, Mr. Chair. Can we just flick to that? It'll take about 30 seconds. In terms of the way forward, this is about a $15 million rough order cost project. We've proposed to Napier City and the LTP that it could be a third deal. There's significant community benefit to support already through Dunk's contacts. Potential business funding partnerships with Mana Whenua Hapu. We are advancing funding initiatives through central government, and also with HBRC regarding funding around the erosion protection function. And there's an indication back from Napier City on the long-term plan results that Napier City's interested in talking to us further about funding a feasibility study. So that's the final slide. Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you guys. Thank you, Graham, for presenting to us today. Yes, I've heard about it through social media and the newspaper. So first time I've heard the kōrero. So thank you for presenting to us this morning. I'll just open up to the committee if anyone had any pātai, any questions. No.
I'll just say a few things or statements really, and then I've got one question. So kia ora, Duncan. We've met before and had this kōrero in the past. It's an aspirational project. It's good to see that there's two Māori trustees that have been kind of left on the tepu. Just wondering if there's been consideration if there's anything that's been taken into consideration around the existing reef structure and kind of where it's kind of been proposed, because there is existing reef there.
Yep, most definitely. As I said, we've worked very closely with John Clark on this. He's been doing a lot of research work, as you know, on the coastal redevelopment here over a 4-year term. He's written a report which is in the hands of the Napier City Council, namely Kirsten Wise and Steph Rodarangi, and also with Stuart Nash. He's made it very clear in a very small but bullet point presentation that shows the impact of the tidal and potential for the increase in tidal lifts. The biggest impact, believe it or not, is right where the Boardwalk Cafe is. And he's made it quite clear that if we don't adopt this project in its form, particularly as the rock pools act as an immovable force for the impact of raising waves and the tidal wash. But he did say that ultimately if this wasn't done with the groins to deflect the tidal movement, we would end up with the rock wall coming in from the entrance to the container end of the port right through to Perfume Point. It will leave a rock wall that's not going to be easily be able to get over, and more importantly, there'll be no beach there because of the tidal wash along that frontage. So the design of that, from that poster, of the positioning of the groins and the design of the pools is to act as a major buffer and give us in the longer term an opportunity to have something that's going to be a great asset. Might mention David Zorn too.
Yes, Te Kaha. I think the question was about current reefs. There is some hard substrate there. A lot of the bay, as you know, and around the place is pretty silty. So a key part of any feasibility study will be to look at both the status, the ecology, the past use, current use of that general area. But it does provide potential for the long-term protection of that area to be sited on something that is reasonably solid. And David Zorn, who's a local surveyor, has got a lot of information about that. But as a harder substrate area, I'm pretty sure it would have had a lot of use over time. So that's a key issue to me in terms of progressing the feasibility and discussing with Mana Whenua, its historical use, its importance going forward.
Yeah.
Kia ora. Kia ora, thank you. I'll actually have to close up questions there, but just moving forward, I think our Mana Whenua hapu will be keen to hear the kōrero, and maybe if you guys can reach out to them and set up maybe a hui with our Mana Whenua, and I think they'll appreciate to hear the kōrero coming from you guys. But yeah, other than that, thank you for presenting this morning. That's the only recommendation we can give. So because it's through, this is public forum at the moment, we can't make any decisions here, but we could just recommend, please reach out to our Mana Whenua. They'll be definitely keen to have that kōrero with you and allow them to ask some more questions. And yeah, kia ora guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Moving on, there are no announcements by chairman. Announcements by management. Can we please have Tony to come forward to speak to the Three Waters? Kia ora.
Kia ora everyone. So the purpose of this brief update is just on the Three Waters reform program by government. So at the LGNZ conference, an announcement was made in relation to the reform of a package of $2.5 billion from government to support the sector through any transitional change of a new service delivery system. The two components of the support package were $2 billion of funding to invest in the future of local government and community wellbeing, and deemed the better off package, and also $500 million to ensure that no local authority would be financially worse off as a direct result of the reform program. Just an important component to highlight is that $1 billion of that package is coming from the Crown, and the other $1.5 billion would be funded through the water entities themselves. As Napier's allocation of that funding that has been proposed is $25.8 million. The next stage in the process following this announcement is with a partnership with LGNZ and government. We've got an 8-week period to work with them to assess this package, to assess the service delivery reform proposals, and to provide our feedback to DIA. DIA have advised that until that period has been completed, they won't be making any further decisions around the reform. As we're aware, there's conversation or kōrero nationally around whether government will mandate or not the service delivery reform. LGNZ have advised that they will not support mandatory implementation of the reforms, but acknowledge that that is government's right to do so. Obviously, the reform that's being proposed in the packages are contingent on all councils participating in the reform. In terms of our own work, so we have acknowledged through this 8-week period, we'll get some more detail in the next week from LGNZ what that means from a process perspective. We'll be seeking to engage our Māori relationship managers and to help facilitate with our Māori committees regionally around feeding into that process. The Hawke's Bay Three Waters own review with the cultural case will be a key part of that. Also, just to advise that we have the Regional Collaboration Day of elected members on Monday the 16th of August. Māori committee chairs have been invited to that, as well as the relationship managers. And at that hui, we will have Alan Pragnell, the director responsible for the reform program from DIA, attending. And we will also have the Deputy Chief Executive LGNZ attending, who are implicitly involved in this 8-week process, as well as to discuss the future of local government. And just to reiterate, no further decisions are expected from government until the end of this 8-week period. So it'll be late September, we expect, the next phase of announcements from government. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the committee? So in regards to a decision as to whether NCC adapt the reform, so just so it's clear for me, it's not compulsory.
At the moment, yes, it's opt-in or opt-out.
The council can choose to opt in, and so what's the council's process around making that decision? Is that you put a recommendation to the council laws and then it might get voted through or not, or?
This is the interesting space at the moment, because the government's process for the reform timetable originally included some steps around consultation with communities. There's been delay in this process with the new 8-week period to work together. And a key part of that is to discuss how we would consult with our communities in terms of making a decision to opt in or opt out of the process. So I know from the discussions and the, I guess, the comments from our mayors and our leaders, both nationally and regionally, is that's a key concern for them, is that any decision, we need to ensure that our communities are consulted.
So of the 3 entities that will end up spreading across all of Aotearoa, which area do we?
We're entity C.
C.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that takes from the top of the East Coast down to the top of the South Island. Yeah, very happy to provide some detail on that.
Yes, please.
The committee.
Okay, thank you. Is that all? Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Moving on to confirmation of minutes. Did everyone get a chance to see the minutes from May?
Right.
I'll take it as read. Kia ora. I'll put the minutes of the Māori Committee meeting held on Friday, 14 May 2021 be taken as a true and accurate record of the meeting. However, I was the only one at that meeting.
That's right.
So,
That's here now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happened. I think that's okay. We can go ahead.
still,
We can still have a seconder. Yeah.
okay, cool. All right. Do I have a seconder to move those? Kia ora, thank you, Whai Adrian. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Ko mana. Kia ora, thank you, guys. Moving on to agenda item number 1, we got the Māori Committee Terms of Reference Development, which we got Morihu.
Kia ora tātou katoa. He mihi ana ki tātou ki tēnei ata, he whakapiri mai ki tēnei kaupapa nuinga a te komiti Māori I ronga I te kāhui o te kaunihera o Ahuriri. The recommendation for our terms of reference is to endorse the recommended process for selecting a new name for our Māori committee. The recommendation is that Te Wakaranga Pū will provide 3 names at our next hui before the September 2021 committee, and with the committee to choose a name from those 3. B is to endorse the 3 portfolio holders as part of the extended Māori committee membership. So what that means is to that we will provide each member a portfolio within council to be part of. Note that the quorum for the Māori committee cannot be extended until additional members of i.e. councillors to be added to the committee, which is the 3 councillors plus mayor. Note that no further action is required to nominate independent advisors. No voting rights to the Māori committee is required, and the delegation has been approved by council. And E is note the progress on review to activities to the scope of the Māori committee to ensure that it reflects the spirit and partnership between Māori, between council and the community, and that will ensure that Māori can contribute effectively within council activities. Any questions from that?
So are we selecting the 3 portfolios today, or is it just to endorse that there will be 3 and then we choose at another date?
That's right.
Okay.
And the reason why is that with the other members not here present, we need to give them the opportunity to be part of that too. So there's a background summary around through this whole thing. So we're actually extending our membership with 4 iwi authority, Māngai Hapori, and 2 councillors. And that's the quorum that we need to have.
Any more further questions on? In regards to the revised document or the additions, we did discuss in the past around potential committee members sitting on select committees.
Yes.
How is that represented?
That's a portfolio.
That's the portfolio?
Yep.
So the select committee members are sitting from the specific portfolios that councillors will be sitting on this committee, but the, I guess, Māori committee members or the mana whenua, I guess, is there the opportunity there to sit on the select committees?
Yes.
Not yet, no.
We haven't adopted it, but that's...
Okay.
No.
So is that something we can look to put into the terms of reference?
That is something that the mayor would have to decide, because it's the mayor who creates the governance structure of the organisation. So if she's changing the membership of the committee, different committees, that's a decision that comes through her if she does a revision of the whole governance structure. So currently here, what we are discussing is adding
the
to the Māori
councillors from
committee.
select committees to the committee.
Yeah, the councillors, yeah,
Couple
based on their portfolio areas.
Yeah, understand that. Just, I guess my comment is, and I think what we've shared in the past is that it's vice versa. You know, the committee members from the Māori committee sit on the select committees. So what would be the process for achieving that?
The process is a review of the governance structures, so that would mean revising the different committees, whom sits on them, what makes them up, and what their delegations are. So,
can that be done at any time, or is that a specific time?
it can be done at any time. Currently, the councillors are going to be through the chair. Sorry,
You're right.
jumped in. The councillors will be doing a mid-triennium review workshop next week, where they're looking at how the triennium is progressing. One of the items to discuss is the governance structure. So the Mayor Wise has signalled that she wants to have a look at how it is functioning and whether it's providing the results that she wanted. And then following that, there will be discussion. Thank you.
Kia ora. Are we able to add something into our terms of reference around seeking membership for the select committee, or that?
You can add in the recommendations. You can note that would be an intention that would be the committee would request that members be included, but that's not within the terms of reference. So within this report, if you would like to add a recommendation, you can add a recommendation that the committee recommend to council that committee members be included in standing committees in any revision of the governance structure.
Cool. Anything else, Lee? Oh, yeah, just the addition of that recommendation. But does that happen after we endorse the...
We'd change what was going to be.
Okay, cool.
Can you just go over the how we're going to endorse those 3 portfolios again?
will we have a bit of a workshop leading up to next meeting maybe, or?
Through the chair, potentially today if you wish, because the intention here is that because various councillors have areas of particular knowledge and community contact, it might be beneficial to select the portfolio holders that have the most importance for mana whenua, or that are going to be really priority areas for you to have discussions and input with various parts of the community. So it's your call today if you'd like to look at the portfolios. There were 4 that were identified as particularly important for the relationship between mana whenua and council. But if it's the committee's right to say we want to wait and discuss it further, or we want to decide today which 3 portfolios we think are best adapted to being around the table with us.
I just think we would need the opportunity to discuss among ourselves first, and then.
Okay, so
Yeah, I agree with that. Oh, but it would be helpful if there is someone to shed some light on this. Is that there's probably more than 3 portfolios that's important.
Yeah.
But what I'm struggling with is the environmental and sustainability, as in choosing that is, and the 3 waters, because they seem to be quite closely linked. And so maybe at our next tui, if someone can maybe just give us a little bit more detail around the differences of the 2. They're quite closely interlinked, and so.
yes, through the chair we can do that.
Oh.
In that case, if I may, through the chair, recommend we can remove from the recommendation B, endorse 3 portfolio holders, because if you don't wish to choose today, we can remove that from the recommendations if you agree, and bring it back when you're ready to have the discussion about which 3 you want to include.
Yes, please.
Yep. So just a note on that, it would be good to make a decision maybe at our next tui, because once we decide, then we can bring in the new councillors. So that's kind of, that decision's pending on new councillors joining the committee, is that right?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So maybe our next tui, we make sure we have the decision, and then maybe offline before that hui, everyone shares their thoughts on the best one, so when we turn up we're good to go.
Yep. So a bit of a workshop before our next Māori committee hui.
Yes.
Thank you. So we've just got the 4 recommendations now?
Or 5 because
Oh,
we
5.
added one.
Add in
Yes.
spoken about the select committee,
Cool.
standing committee.
Does someone want to move those 5 recommendations? Kia ora whai Adrian, seconder. I can second that. Kia ora. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Cool, mana. Kia ora, thank you. Kia ora. Item number 2, got Māori Wards final consultation planned, and do we have Natasha? Kia ora, Natasha.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou e rangatira mā, kua tai mai nei I tēnei hui, ko Natasha Mackie tōku ingoa.
Kia ora.
I'm just here to introduce the Māori Wards update paper around the consultation plan and campaign. So just a bit of a recap. On the 14th of May, we brought a proposed consultation approach to the Māori Committee, which was substantially a 2-stage approach being recommended. Firstly, an engagement period where we would undertake discussions and in a kind of a knowledge building exercise across the community, and then followed by a formal consultation process. And the second part of the approach proposed was to undertake a co-design process involving mana whenua and Māori Committee. So at that meeting, Māori Committee endorsed that approach, and we set about starting the process of co-design, which was pretty intense and quick. And I'd just like to thank the Māori Committee for being involved in that process, and Chad in particular, who participated fully in the workshops. So today the consultation plan is the final plan being proposed, and really through that co-design process, we confirmed the two-stage approach as being appropriate. We identified an engagement approach with mana whenua entities, and we created a campaign to run alongside both the engagement and consultation periods. There is one of the things we also have confirmed through the process was the formal consultation dates, and you'll see that in the paper that we identified that we really wanted to have a couple of weeks clear of the Hastings District Council and Hawke's Bay Regional Council consultation for Māori wards, or for the representation review, their representation reviews, which include how they would establish their Māori wards, just so that we could have some time with the Napier community just about the whether or not to establish Māori wards for Ahuriri. So today we'd be keen to get that confirmed through the Māori Committee. So really some of the things that came up were that the plan acknowledges the high level of interest from mana whenua entities, and also their ability to activate their engagement with hapu and whānau across Napier. And we are keen to work on that with mana whenua entities, and so we have invited them to a meeting at Pukimoki Marae. And I just wanted to update, since writing the paper, we have actually had some feedback from mana whenua entities, two in particular, who have advised they're unable to attend that meeting. However, they have taken up the invitation to request a meeting outside of that meeting. So that's a really good step forward. So just in terms of how it's going, because we are actually in the middle of the engagement period now. So the campaign was launched in June, and since launching it, we've had really, really good exposure digitally, with our website having over 3,000 visits, and social we've had a reach of over 50,000, and 95 people have signed up through the website to receive ongoing information. So once the consultation period opens properly, in terms of people being able to submit, we will send an email out to those 95 people so that they know that they're ready to go. We've undertaken 2 cup of tea sessions, which were drop-in sessions for the community to come and kōrero with ward councillors and staff, and we have 2 further sessions planned. We've also had 2 groups request a bukahui with the councillors and staff. So we've actually undertaken one of those with Napier's Pilot City Trust, who are really supportive and keen to also engage their networks and ensure that people are aware of the consultation on Māori wards. And finally, just a little bit of information about what sort of feedback we're getting. Mainly it's been about questions around how would Māori wards work in Ahuriri, and also a bit of a balance really between people wanting to know why there's a need for Māori wards, and then also people saying, yes, we need Māori wards. So it's quite mixed at the moment in terms of the feedback, but really overall I think people are wanting to know more about what Māori wards are and how they would work. In the consultation period, so it's a formal consultation period, we are proposing to hold 2 community hui, so that would be open to everybody in the community to come and talk with staff about the mechanics and how Māori wards might work, and to promote people to have their say. So today is really, we're proposing to for the Māori Committee to endorse the consultation plan as you have in front of you, and also confirming those dates of 16th of August to the 10th of September for formal consultation to occur. And that would mean that hearings would be undertaken in October.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions, committee?
Kia ora, Natasha. Thanks for the update. Sounds like a bit of mahi going on there. Just wondering, are we looking at putting together a more detailed plan in regards to the engagement?
Kia ora, that's a very good question through the chair. So how we always undertake consultation is that for governance we provide a high-level consultation plan which identifies the approach, proposed approach, and also identifying key stakeholders and how we intend to engage with key stakeholders. And then operationally we undertake a detailed consultation plan which has the the who, where, why, when. So that is in place, yes.
Cool. Is there the ability for us to be engaged as a part of that process, putting together that detailed plan?
Through the chair, that is operational, and what the plan reflects. It's like a project plan, but it does reflect the input that the co-design process had. So, talks about the details around how each engagement activity will work and who will do what. It's quite detailed around to the extent of who sets up what and when we arrive and things like that. So it's quite a high level of detail when it's operational.
Cool. Just have another comment around the community hui, the meeting places. Are we looking at bringing in expert speakers around the treaty? Because I think that lays a really good context to the Māori wards kōrero, and that can also help better for people to be better educated around why Māori wards are needed, which seems to be the key question.
Kia ora. Through the chair, we are actually at the moment trying to arrange a treaty workshop for the community that actually was endorsed by the Napier City Pilot Trust, who are happy to host such a workshop. So we are looking at doing that fairly soon, in the lead up to the consultation period. But if we can't get it done before that, then we still have that extra month. So yes, is the short answer.
Can that be a part of the community huis? Is that able to be like at the front end of the hui? Because it just helps lay a really strong.
Yeah, we can
foundation for the
look at
kōrero to
that.
follow.
It will just depend on availability of the facilitator, but yeah, absolutely, we can look at that.
And just through the chair, we're also setting up some programs with internally in council for our councillors, senior staff, management and executive staff as well. We've got 4 programs coming starting next week to engage with treaty programs. One through the treaty human rights sort of program. The wall walk is coming. We've also got our kaumātua who will talk to us about the local PSGE with Mana Ahuriri, and we'll also have another workshop to just give a bit of roundup about treaty as well. So we are looking at externally, but we're also looking internally as well.
Just in regards to the engaging mana whenua entities, they had also recommended engaging directly with the marae as well. Could we look at that again, please?
Certainly. Yep.
And how are you guys handling all the social media comments and stuff like that?
So we have only had 2 comments that we've had to delete because they don't meet our standards, and which is out of over 300 comments, I think is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we have a moderator who does that.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Ka pai. Well, before you go, ka riri atu ana te mihi mahana, tēnei kia koe, Natasha, mō tō mahi, tō puku mahi ki tēnei kaupapa whakahirahira. Yeah, kia ora, thank you for your mahi regarding this kaupapa. Your mahi has been seen, and well, yeah, thank you just on behalf of the whānau. Kia ora, thank you, Natasha. So the officer's recommendation is that the Māori committee endorse the Māori wards high-level consultation plan, acknowledging the co-design approach to its development. Do I have a mover for that? Kia ora. Kia ora. Seconder for that? Kia ora, whai, Adrian. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say ko. Ko mana. Kia ora, thank you. Adrian, so we've just mindful of time. Adrian's got to leave soon. Do you have to leave at 10, was it? Or?
No, I'm good to past 10.
Cool. So we'll just move straight into the reports from the standing committees then. First up, we've got the Napier Community Safety Survey. Do we have Michelle, was it? Kia ora, thank you, Michelle. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Michelle Greg toko ingoa no Rotorua ahau. He ahuriri ahau I noho ana, he kaimahi ahau mō te konihira o ahuriri.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to this paper. Essentially, I'll quickly summarise what we've written. This was a survey of the community that was done in February this year. Coincidentally, it was in the field before an incident that happened at West Quay, so we gathered some perceptions from the community before that incident around safety and their ideas for improving community safety. The survey was implemented in a range of ways, so people had the opportunity to do it online or over the phone, and there was also the opportunity to send in postal survey forms. And we contracted SIL Research to do the survey for us as an independent body. So very briefly, the main findings from the survey is that there's been a significant increase in perceptions around people feeling unsafe in Napier. And in particular, this is more likely amongst the younger residents that were surveyed, so 18 to 39-year-olds, and that may be because they're out and about more often than older residents. And that there were some differences in safety perceptions depending on time of the day, location, so people feeling less safe when out at night and walking alone in their neighbourhood at night, but more safe in their own home or in the city during the daytime. And then safety initiatives that people suggested included more police presence, CCTV cameras in public places, and security patrols. And there's some work you may be aware of that's happening within council at the moment where we've had an approval by council given to us to upgrade the CCTV network in the city and to implement through the long-term plan a new street ambassador service in the city as well. So those two combined will hopefully alleviate some of these concerns. Once this paper's endorsed by yourselves and by council, we'll be sharing it with our partners, and we're working with police and others in the community that have a key role to play in terms of safety on what we can do to improve perceptions within the community. And that includes our Safer Napier partners. And just lastly, to comment on our social monitor, which is an annual survey that we do about August, September every year. So we're planning that monitor at the moment. It is a broader social perception survey, but we are going to include some of these safety questions as well so that we can keep tracking this over time and see where this trend goes. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Open to any questions if the committee have any questions. Edwin?
Oh, it was, probably more just kōrero, just thanks for the report. It's a bit sad to see that the community feels a little bit unsafer. Good to know that there's some of the recommendations are being taken up around the CCTV and security cameras and the such. And I know that the Napier City Council does great work with the community programs, and I wonder if expanding on that or kind of providing more community programs like the Māori movement. I know that great initiatives for whānau that are in those challenging circumstances, and so I just wonder if one of the approaches might be to, beef up those community initiatives for whānau in situations where, I think one of the mentions here were around gangs, so, targeting those areas. Not to whakaiti all the mahi that's been done at the moment, because there's heaps, but I wonder if we can focus a little bit more.
Through the chair. Sure, we'll have to hand over to Natasha.
Kia ora, sorry, just we are responding in terms of being shifting our focus a little into this area, given the results of that survey. So while we had a number of activities planned throughout the year with the community, we are working quite closely with our partners to refocus some of those into the areas where we're identifying that people are having this perception of feeling unsafe in their communities. And also, I think, just to endorse what you're saying, Te Kaha, around the preventative programs and how important that they are as well. And so we have just supported the Māori movement whānau transformation program in two communities in Ahuriri, and we're about to hear the results of those programs at the next council meeting, so people can tune into that to hear how that's been going and looking at how those programs can be sustained over time in order to address some of these issues.
Kia ora, thank you. I'll put that the Māori committees recommends that the Napier City Council resolve that the committee's recommendations be adopted. Do I have a second for that? Kia ora whai, Adrian. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 All those against, please say kao. Aye, kua mana. Moving on to the aquatics. Thank you, Michelle. The aquatics survey report. Do we have Glenn Lucas here? Kia ora, Glenn.
Tēnā koutou katoa. He kaimea hi ahau auti kanahira o Ahuriri. Ko kirikiri rā ahau, engari kei Ahuriri o e noho ana, ko Glenn Lucas toku o ngā. So, the paper that's in front of you was really developed in response to, we have a couple of big capital priorities in terms of the aquatics area, full stop. So, with the removal of funding for a new aquatic centre, for a new community aquatic centre, that's meant that we've had to look at the existing facility quite hard in terms of, okay, if the horizon needs to be pushed out from what we thought was going to be, 2 years, if not less, to 10 years, what investment do we need to put into there to make sure it can last that long and provide an acceptable level of service to our customers? And we've also got some work underway with the marine parade pools or ocean spa, with the existing contract is coming up in January 2023, so we want some work to to invest in there and to spruce that place up a little bit and again increase the level of service and return it to what it should be. So in order to help us to really focus on what's important to our customers, over a long period of time our aquatics survey results, satisfaction survey results haven't been very positive at all. They've been hovering around sort of between 50 and 60, and you're all nodding your heads, so it's probably no surprise to you as well. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about exactly why that is and to try to get some input, really importantly, in terms of not just the users, the people that use our facilities, but what do non-users think and how can we improve these and where do we need to focus this potential investment to to maximise the benefits for our community. So SIL Research again was engaged, so they were very busy over those couple of months with Michelle's work and my work. I was really pleased with the results. Hopefully you've had a chance to have a good look through them. But to me, they were really, really representative of exactly what I was trying to get with this. And it provided a really good cross-section of Napier and our community, and at times, the consultation process that we go through, you get the same organised bodies, the same people come in, and we know very well about what they think, but this was, really trying to get to actually what do our general users, what do our community think, and how do we better meet the needs of our regular users and non-users. So the results, we separated the results into the Aquatic Centre and Marine Parade pools. Overall satisfaction for the Napier Aquatic Centre was about 5.96 out of 10, so there's a significant gap there in terms of, we could be a hang of a lot better. The themes there, and none of this will surprise you, more larger pools was the highest suggested improvement, followed by general improvement, cleaning upgrade, wider range of facilities, greater availability. Marine Parade pools were slightly different, but again there was a big focus in the themes of a general improvement, a cleaning upgrade, more wider range of features, facilities, more larger pools, and greater availability. So the next part of the report sort of goes into, okay, we've heard this and from our customers in terms of, and potential customers in terms of what they would like to see from our aquatic facilities. We've tried to sort of draw some implications for future planning and investment. So where are we going to go? How are we going to use this information through these capital planning that we're undertaking at the moment? So I think the input really helped me in terms of, because we're trying to think of the aquatics facilities, the two facilities as a network, and we've never really done that before. So what does one provide, what does the other one provide, and how do they complement each other rather than duplicate each other? And a lot of the feedback really helped to solidify in terms of the roles of both of those facilities, and that Marine Parade Pools or Ocean Spa should be a destination facility, should provide that slightly more premium experience. It is about health, relaxation, well-being. It is something that we should be proud of, and when you've got a visitor from out of town, that's that should be on your destination list in terms of taking them to show off Napier in one of our facilities. Whereas the Aquatic Centre is very much a community facility, and if you're, people should go there a lot more regularly for health and fitness, for their training, for leisure and play and recreation with family and all that sort of thing. So there's two really separate and distinct roles, which we need to focus on making sure they continue to be separate and distinct. Old, run down and needs upgrading for the aquatic facility. There's a whole bunch of ideas that were already underway in terms of trying to increase this, but we're also underway with a capital review program, I guess, to have a good look under the hood down there and try to develop a big list of actually what's it going to take to push this thing out 10 years and make sure that it's it's going to last and it's going to provide an acceptable level of service. So that will be coming back to council and this committee once we've finished it. So it'll be a little way along. Probably the most significant theme was there's not enough pools, it's too busy, it's too overcrowded, and if we're just going to invest in the existing facility, there's pretty limited ability to change that too much. There are some levers we can pull with investment in terms of trying to spread people out from congregating on that one Ivan Wilson facility with limited space into what can we provide outside, how can we do the playground, how do we create more sort of communal facilities for gathering outside, potentially moving an eating area outside, so there's there's just more more spaces for people to congregate and shift the focus of a whole bunch of people on in one place. And I'll come back to security at the end because it dovetails quite nicely with what Michelle was saying previously, and it was also a theme across both of the facilities. So for Marine Parade pools, there was some similarity in the themes in terms of old, rundown, needs upgrading. We've got some projects in this financial year in terms of replacing the sauna and steam room and upgrading the changing rooms, which I think are really quite consequential and influential. The results did point very firmly to the importance of changing rooms and cleanliness to a lot of our customers, and none of that will surprise you. I need to point out here that cleanliness or perception of cleanliness is not always because the surface is dirty and the team hasn't cleaned it properly. It could well be because the surface is old or degraded surfaces and things need a bit of a refresh. So they might look dirty, but they're as clean as they possibly can be. And I guess one of the key insights from Marine Parade Pools, which is separate from the Napier Aquatic Centre, is expensive and poor value for money. So poor value for money is both a function of the money you pay at the door, but also of the experience that you get when you come through the door. There is an ability to have a look at the entry price, but I think the biggest gain there is actually trying to improve the look and feel of the facility and the services and that sort of thing. So the value for money you receive is more equitable or more lined up with the money that you pay at the door. And going back to security, safety and security, and we've got Adrian here who's seen one or two incidents firsthand, that it is probably one of the most important things that we are focusing on at the moment with the Aquatic Centre particularly, and I was quite interested to see that it was coming through a little bit with Ocean Spa. Ocean Spa is a little bit different because it is run by a management company, so I'm sort of one step removed from that, so we don't see it every single day. It's a really tough, thorny issue to try and address. We've had security down there at the Aquatic Centre in the weekends and also through holidays, and that's really helped. We've pulled a whole bunch of levers in terms of, particularly from that tragic drowning incident in last December, to try to be a little bit more aware of customers and their kids, and making sure that the whole pool alone policy has been implemented consistently. And it would be fair to say we're getting there, but there's still a little bit of an issue with we're working really hard on it, and we're trying to develop our own way of making sure that our approach to addressing customers, diffusing issues is right for our team and our customers and our space. We've had a whole bunch of training from various providers, but we need to sort of meld that together and come up with a way that's an approach that's right for us and a language that's right for us, which that work is underway. So really the report, the recommendations were to note the results of the survey, to note the influence of these insights for future investment and improvements for the aquatic network for both of the facilities, and to endorse continued work to plan and implement capital and operational improvements into both facilities. So that's the report. Very happy to answer any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you. Open to any questions.
Just with the Aquatic Centre, kia ora, thanks for the report. With the Aquatic Centre, did you say that the plans to push it out another 10 years? Is that?
That's the horizon that we've practicably had to adopt. If there's because there's no money in the LTP for 10 years, that's the horizon. That may be looked at, and Council have said they will be looking at it in the next LTP. But even if it is looked at that stage, it takes a long time to design and implement, so it's going to take us quite close to 10 years anyway, if that's the horizon where we've got impetus to do something new. Whether that something new is at that site or somewhere else, there's a lot of there's a lot to go before we're unlocking the door on a new facility. So 10 years is the horizon that we've adopted to make sure that the existing facility can last that long and to provide an acceptable level of service.
And one of the feedback was to build a bigger pool, and did you say that that's just not an option? Is it because of the site, because of where it is? And
it's been a very complex journey to date. Really, it's because there is no funding. So aquatic facilities are hugely expensive. The price for the one that we had proposed for 2-3 years ago was $41.3 million. It's by the time we get to that, it's going to be significantly more. But if we've got there's no money in the LTP to fund a significant aquatic development at the moment. So until such time as there is, we need to focus on doing the best we can with what we've got.
Any further questions? Adrian? No questions? Thank you. Well, no further questions from me. So we've got 3 recommendations. Do we have someone please move that the Māori Committee recommends that the Council resolve that the Committee's recommendations be adopted. Note the results of the aquatic survey. Note the influence of these insights to future investment and improvements for Napier's aquatic network. Endorse continued work to plan and implement capital and operational improvements to both aquatic facilities. Do I have a mover for that? Kia ora, thank you. Whai Adrian, would you like to second that?
Sure.
Kia ora. Oh, tautoko that, kua mana. Thank you. Kia ora.
Sorry, TK.
Next we have
Next one was a decision.
Okay. Did we skip that one? Okay, then we'll move on to the procurement policy. Do we have Adele? Oh, is Adele speaking to that, or?
Yes, I will, and just through the chair. So the purpose of the procurement policy is to bring through the 4 wellbeings. Previously, we've been operating under what we've called our contracts policy, which was originally brought through under the NZTA rules. And so what this procurement policy now allows us to do is consider the 4 wellbeings as we progress through these changes, with central government and with our local council. We've been working regionally across our councils, and on our website is also some information for the wider community about how they may engage with us around what we're calling the progressive procurement. But this policy is effectively taking us to that next stage. What you will find with the policy, however, is that it previously had some details around how we might tender, and that will come through into our strategy. But I think the policy itself is probably reasonably prescriptive and outlines what we're planning on doing going forward. But it's a good move for the community and looking for those better outcomes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions regarding that?
Kia ora, Adele. Thanks. It's awesome to see that the 4 wellbeings have been integrated into the procurement process. Just got a couple of suggestions. So for the social box, I guess in the 4 wellbeings, is there anything around diversity?
Yes. So obviously with each of our procurement, we will be looking at what that means on a case-by-case basis, and diversity is certainly something that we'll be considering. As you'll probably be aware, central government, for a lot of their procurement are actually targeting, for example, 5% Māori as part of their diversity requirement. But, ours might be considered differently on each of our procurement, so that's certainly noted.
Also, for the environmental side, is there, I guess, any points around maybe the companies that are secure the contract, or that they have to have a sustainability strategy and environmental management strategy? Are those some of the things that are included as a part of the process? Or is that something we can look at including?
Thank you. That is a very good question. With the procurement, obviously size and scale is important. So depending on what we're actually procuring, we'll see some of those emphasis in how we might consider who we're going to deal with in that procurement. So, for example, a smaller contract may not require that same level of detail that we might do, for example, in our stormwater contracts, which we would obviously, gear up and require a high level of sustainability and environmental impacts. So you're right, it'll be, based on the procurement, and we'll be interested in how we might set up the conditions around allocating that procurement.
So is there going to be a matrix of some sort of when these specific requirements get, just reading between the lines stuff, it's a bigger contract or it's worth more money, then there'll be a higher requirement on whether having a sustainability strategy or an environmental management plan. Is there a matrix to kind of trigger those requirements, or is that to be developed?
Through the chair, it's something that we're going to be doing some further work in our strategy, and we will take on board the feedback from the committee.
And, sorry, just the last part, is there going to be a weighting of some sort put against the different well-beings? Like how do you weigh up the 4 different well-beings across, the kind of three overarching boxes there, and then you've got the meeting objectives and delivered in a way that's effective and the such. Do you put a weighting across those when making that decision, or how is that made? How is that decision made for that contract?
And through the chair, another very good question. It all comes down to the contract itself as well. So those weightings might change depending on what we're actually seeking from that particular contract. But those wellbeings certainly come into that final decision. And so we've had some advice through our regional procurement specialists that those weightings now are getting higher in that regard from what they originally were. So I think they originally were sort of looking about 15% weighted towards wellbeings. But depending on the contract itself, that might see it actually go higher. So rather than just price and quality as being the key ones previously supported, that wellbeing piece will come in, and it will be considered across those four wellbeings. But again, it will be more around what are we trying to seek as the outcome of a particular contract as to then what those weightings might look like. And those details will be developed as part of our strategy. So it's kind of the next level down, sorry, just that sits below the procurement policy itself. It's a bit more of the how and why.
Detail, yeah. Couple, killed it.
Thank you, Adele, for talking to us and answering those questions, and thank you, Takaha, for those questions. Nothing further on that? Adrian? No? Ka pai. I'm happy to put that the Māori Committee recommends that the Napier City Council resolve that the committee's recommendations be adopted. Committee's recommendations approve the recommendation to supersede the council contract policy with the procurement policy, approve and adopt the procurement policy, note a procurement strategy to support the policy is under development. Do I have a second for that, please?
Yep, kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Takaha. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say ka. Ko mana. Thank you, Adele.
Kia ora, thanks.
Welcome.
Moving on to revised CCTV policy. Duncan, Duncan?
No, Duncan's just keep it Adele.
Oh, Adele, can you please speak to the...
Absolutely. Just through the chair, so this is just an update to our current policy just to make sure that we are just noting the changes that are also potentially coming down the pipeline. So in the paper, you've noted that we've excluded the trust work. So at the moment, we're working closely with the trust and working, as you've noted in our long-term plan, we've been undertaking some consultation around sorry, I'll just bring up the policy for a moment, please. Sorry, one moment. So at the moment, we've been working around the updates to the policy. The CCTV policy provides for camera locations, the way that we undertake our monitoring of those cameras, including the privacy issues, and then who is responsible for accessing that information, including the police. What it does note is that the policy currently excludes the trust, and we are working closely with them to take over those CCTVs effective from 1 July as part of our wider city ambassador program and CCTV service delivery. And once we do take on board their network, then we will update the CCTV policy itself in light of those changes. But this is just confirming who has access, where those CCTVs are, and again, what our requirements are with regards to sharing of that information based on the Privacy Act. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Can I please have a mover to move that the Māori Committee recommends that the Council resolve that the committee's recommendations be adopted? Thank you, Whai Adrian. Do I have a seconder?
Hold up.
Kia ora, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against, please say Kyle. Ko mana. Thank you, Adele.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We have the waste. Alex Spook? No? Ka pai. Can we move on to the Lacane toilet block? Do we have... Oh, I still need to move it. Has the committee had a chance to receive the waste levy expenditure audit report? Happy to move it. Hold up. Yep, I'll move. If I happy to second. Kia ora, o tautoko, ko mana. Thank you. Moving on to the Lacane toilet block renewal. Do you have Jason? No? Do we have anyone available to speak to us? Oh, that's right. So I'll put that the Māori Committee recommends that the Council resolve that the Committee's recommendation be adopted. Recommendations being the Sustainable Napier Committee agree to replace the public toilet block on Lacane Road within close proximity to its existing location. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
Aye.
Kia ora, thank you, Te Kaha. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against, please say Kyle. Kua mana. Moving on to coastal erosion funding recommendation. Is that Adele? Adele, are you still there?
Yes, I am. One moment, I'll just bring up the paper. Sorry, just one moment, please.
Just text me now.
Okay.
She just said she'll get back to me if it lets me go back.
In, through the chair. So the purpose of this report is to give the committee an update around the funding of the Clifton to Tongeo Coastal Hazard Strategy. This has been a long piece of work, as probably you're all aware, around how we might fund in the longer term the work that's required. And the recommendation that's now before the committee is that this is going to be considered through the Regional Council. A report that endorsed this was undertaken by Mr. Rainer Asher QC, and he outlined his reasons for suggesting that this is a Regional Council activity. And to enable the Regional Council to undertake this, it would require a long-term plan amendment, and it also requires the endorsement of both Napier Council and Hastings Council in advance of the decision of the Regional Council. To date, Napier has endorsed the approach, and the reason for this is that it will mean that the any projects that are undertaken can be considered as a whole rather than each council potentially doing a mitigation and a prevention for coastal hazards that may actually interrupt the wider program of works. And so our council has been supportive of the approach that the funding and the rating of that will be undertaken at the regional level. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Hold on. Open to any questions and comments. Yeah, no? Edward? No questions from us, Adele. Thank you. Can I have someone please to move that the Māori Committee supports the committee's recommendations and recommends that the council resolve that the committee's recommendations be adopted? Over mover for that, please. Thank you, Whai Adrian. Second? Thank you, Takaha. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say ka. Kua mana. Moving on to resource consent activity update. Do we have? No. No? I'm happy to. Oh, thank you, Richard.
Through the Chair, Morena, I'm happy to take any questions on that. We've had quite a lot of activity in the resource consenting. I think the whole region's pumping, if you like, in terms of development. We've had a lot of activity in that space, and I guess the developments that we've highlighted there there's no real controversy with them, but we have put them down there as some of the bigger ones or more interesting ones. But happy to take any questions.
Open questions. Kia ora. Thanks for the report. Is there consideration taken into liquefaction, and is it over the Awatoto, I guess, development in particular, or the housing development? Not saying that's a bad thing because we need more houses, but just mindful that, is that over a liquefaction area? And
yeah,
I know there's some long-term planning around taking into account flooding and erosion-prone areas and where liquefaction is. But is the reason why? I'll let you answer it.
That's a good question, because I think the whole, actually most places that our cities are built on have some problems, either tsunami, flooding, earthquake, liquefaction, or it's highly productive, or there's always something. So the way it works is that, we've had the development, I guess if you had started from scratch, you'd probably not put Napier where it was, and you'd put it somewhere else, but we can't do that. It's here now, and there is a sort of an established development pattern. And I think while we're getting better at identifying those hazards, we can't avoid them now. We have to mitigate them, really, with some of those, the development around the city. And that one's a case in point where they use structural fill and things like that to mitigate the liquefaction underneath that. So they have to have a certain standard before, to meet that development, being a new area.
Nothing further? Nothing further from the Māori Committee. Thank you, Richard. I've just moved that the Māori Committee recommends that the council resolve that the committee's recommendations be adopted. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Takaha. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Okay. So Napier Spatial.
Yeah.
Cool. Move on to the Napier Spatial picture. Catherine and Dean. Kia ora, Dean.
Morena. Catherine's a little bit ill today, so she's asked me to present the spatial picture. And then I've also got the draft district plan one following. Got a couple of presentations for both of those items. Can we bring up the other one? That's the district plan. Can we get the spatial picture?
You start talking, I'll bring it up.
So the Napier spatial picture is it's a pretty core document that's relating to urban growth, and there's a lot of legal requirements to provide for the urban growth. There has been for a long time. You're probably aware of HPUDs as the Heretaunga Plains Urban Development Strategy that came into existence in 2010 and sort of looks to cater for a 30-year growth horizon. Those sort of requirements for future development strategies are now enshrined in legislation and a requirement, and the government has passed a national policy statement on urban development. We're already up to the second iteration of that particular policy statement, and it's becoming more and more prescriptive in terms of requiring councils to do this and must do that. So the Napier spatial picture is Napier's version of capturing all the information we have at hand and identifying where we can actually have growth occurring. So the spatial picture, as I say, it's actually just capturing a lot of the information and work streams that we're currently involved in doing. So yeah, so the big issue for us, for Napier, is we need to provide around 3,500 homes in the next 10 years. That's our best estimate in terms of doing a lot of research into trying to quantify the extent of the demand, and now we need to provide the supply. So where are we going to cater for those 3,500 homes, which is 350 houses a year, which is actually quite a lot and consumes land quite quickly. So we had a 9% population increase between 2013 and 2018, which is a significant jump from the trends, historical trends. And a lot of that was sort of immigration. It was driven by immigration. There was net migration into New Zealand and then flow-on effects for all the regions, including ours. So the spatial picture also needs to look at business and industrial growth and where we're going to cater for that. We've currently been working on a housing capacity assessment for both Napier Hastings, the Heretaunga Plains sub-region, and the next stage of that is identifying actual business and industrial growth options. The business and industrial is probably a little bit more tricky and less reliable the longer horizon you put on it. But whatever growth strategy we have and under the national policy statement, we need to actually have a lot of iterations and review of the documents every year for some things, every 3 years for other things. So there's a lot of interest from central government to make sure that all the regions, the cities are providing urban growth options and housing options in particular at the moment. So some of the work streams that are underway, we've got a sub-regional approach to industrial growth. So this presentation's there now, so could you just go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is some of the existing work streams that are fed into the spatial picture. So there's a sub-regional industrial growth strategy working with Hastings because Napier simply doesn't have the land or the suitable land. The extent of land is it's actually required to cater for all the new industrial growth. And if you think of the scale of the operations in Whakatū and down a Mahu Road, you'll sort of get an idea of how much land quickly gets taken up with industrial development. So the idea is that sort of large, heavy, wet industries would sort of be preferred to be located into Hastings district, into the Hastings area, and Napier would sort of have a niche role in terms of sort of having industrial activities that need close access to the airport, the port, and also sort of high-tech sort of operations where we sort of don't have to cater for the massive land. And as you touched on, the liquefaction issues for those larger buildings are really problematic. We've done some work on growth in the hills in terms of doing some high-level structure plans to determine how we can get growth going on to the hills. They've sort of come back and identified the fact that there's a real problem with the slope, steepness of the slopes in the hills, on the Western Hills. And there's also cultural issues and other contributing factors which limit its opportunities. But the reality is that the yields are relatively low and the costs are quite high at this stage. But it is still an option, and there's going to be further work undertaken to try and sort of get better quantification around where we can actually put growth in the hills and what sort of costs would be involved in it, and then weigh them up against the sort of the benefits that come with it, with more resilience rather than reliance on the sort of flat land. There's been a lot of infrastructural work going on in terms of the three waters. There's like models being developed now for the city and the drinking water, the wastewater, and the stormwater. And that the output of those models has sort of fed into the council's LTP at this stage, and sort of some projects are being identified which are being generated by those models. And you're probably well aware of the issues with the wastewater treatment and the outfall pipes. That's sort of being captured by the models, and certainly for wastewater is a sort of a pinch point, a blockage in the system, if you like, in terms of catering for further growth. So it's sort of getting prioritisation around which are the key projects and which ones need to go first before the other ones. And as part of the LTP, there's also been a financial contributions policy developed, which is trying to encourage more infill intensification within the city within the existing urban footprint. So that's how it's part of the LTP. If you go to the next slide. So yeah, so the spatial picture is just trying to identify where the city can cater for its growth. And the spatial picture has been developed through its own little process and is sort of a key part of the district plan. And the district plan is the next item on the agenda, which I'll talk to then. But they both go together. So if we're going to cater for the growth identified through the spatial picture, there will be flow-on effects going into the district plan. So we're consulting on both of those at the same time. But there, as you can read, there's been some workshops and analysis, options analysis undertaken, and but the main feedback that we're looking to do now is with the community and get that through as part of the district plan. So if you go to the next slide. So residential intensification, this is a mandatory requirement under the new national policy statements. We do have to provide for increasing intensification of our urban area, which basically means more houses on smaller, less land. So there is a requirement to sort of look at going up. How high depends on the location. Obviously, in a city, we'd be wanting to have sort of, you know, if you think 6-7 story apartment kind of buildings. And if you look at the sort of the suburban areas, it was sort of walk up sort of 3-story apartments. So if we're going to cater for it, what sort of factors do we take into consideration? And they're up there in front of you. The fact that you can have proximity to public transport, easy access to jobs, close walking ability to key centres, to key places like WINS, schools, supermarkets, healthcare, doctors, and that sort of thing. So they all all of those things are separate sort of factors that actually layer up, and so the more of those that contribute, that combine together, gets you the areas where intensification would be more suited. So obviously, if you have all of those sort of factors in one location, that's an ideal place to have intensification. So if you just go back to the last picture there, so that you can see on that picture there that obviously the suburban centres along the key transport road, Kennedy Road, joining Napier to Taradale, they and the suburban centres along there are the ones that have the most of those easy of access to all of those sort of facilities, and so that's the obvious and logical places to try and provide for intensification and facilitate redevelopment and the ability to sort of have a more intensified, higher sort of intensity of infill housing. So if you could go on to the next one. And then of course there's greenfield growth. You can't just do it all through intensification. Typically it's sort of like a 50-50 split between greenfield growth versus intensification. That's the historical trends and that's what the reality is. HPUDs is trying to sort of move so that it's a little bit more intensification and less reliance on greenfield growth, but the new national policy statement's basically requiring us to sort of open up our eyes a little bit more towards more greenfield growth as well, just to at least try and solve the housing problem that we have at the moment. So the greenfield growth is either obviously in the hills or as per the existing HPUD's idea around the existing urban area, but in areas that do have some issues around resilience, liquefaction. There's a requirement under the National Policy Statement to look really closely at market feasibility. So you can't just zone pieces of land and hope people will go there. There needs to be the infrastructure to support the zoning, and also the fact that actually developers will actually go there and develop the land. So it can't be sort of completely unaffordable. You just can't do that. So there's a whole lot of work streams that will need to come in. So if you go to the next slide, the next steps, the spatial picture is where, and the spatial picture in the draft district plan, we're looking to get notification subject to council approval on the August the 5th. So we'll be looking for feedback on both of those documents between August and September of this year. And then following that, we'll be looking at the spatial plan, which is a sort of the next ramped up version of it, and that's how we're going to provide for the growth. So to do that, there's another whole series of work programs, which involves looking at the structure plans, which is all the infrastructure needed to support it, and then this market feasibility assessment to make sure that it actually works in practice. And yeah, then the phase 3, once that's all finished, is to sort of how we actually deliver it, where we deliver it, and get on with it really. So that would go into the next LTP process with the funding to support the zoning. So I think the agenda item's requesting just endorsement to adopt and release for consultation purposes. So happy to take any questions.
Kia ora, thank you for that presentation. Open to any questions, comments from the committee. Kia ora hoa, thanks for the presenting on the report. The 3,500 houses that's predicted for the next 10 years, does that take into account the housing shortage at the moment? Do you what's our understanding of the housing shortage at the moment? Like, do we have numbers or?
It's an excellent question, and it's a very difficult question to actually answer with any sort of certainty. But we do know that there's a latent problem, so there is a catch-up requirement, and that 3,500 incorporates, to the best of our ability, what that latent problem is. And there's been a lot of work, and we're doing a housing capacity assessment at the moment, which is trying to sort of quantify how much backlog of housing we need to provide. And it's probably the most difficult question to try and actually get a definitive answer on. So I guess there's a lot of factors that flow into it and influence it, but without any certainty as to getting that number. So if you think RSE workers coming in, 4,000 now, projected to go to 8,000, they all need to be housed within the area as well. So traditionally going into houses and then sort of like having accommodation provided on the orchards themselves, none of which is the scale to cater for that particular growth. So now Hastings is looking at sort of having sort of major sort of housing compounds, if you like, and industrial zones as well to cater for the large scale needs, where you can actually have whole communities living together, which is kind of the preferred approach for some of those RSE workers. So I can't give you a number of exactly what it is, how much behind the ballpark we are, but you know, it's probably more around that sort of 500 houses kind of thing. With, yes.
If someone said I can build 500 houses today, is there the land available to do that?
So urban growth is tricky to deal with because it costs a whole lot of money to provide the infrastructure, and it has to be infrastructure led in the fact that there's front loading on all the costs for providing infrastructure. So at the moment within Napier we've got the mission land, which has sort of been authorised for having 550 houses. That's got no planning impediments to moving ahead with that. That's up to the developer to come along and provide it. It's costly. There's always costs and the front end costs are the difficult ones because you put a lot of money up front and then it takes a long time to recoup. We've got parklands. There's about another 350 houses able to be catered for within parklands. there's a treaty claim settlement potential on the old ex-hospital site along Whararangi Road, next to sort of Park Island, and there's about 170 houses that could go in there. Council's currently looking at about another 100 houses on a sort of piece of land along the expressway, which is sort of between Westminster Ave or Tamatea going onto Prebenson Drive. And then there's Te Awa, and there's about another 1,200 houses, 1,000 houses that can get catered in there. And then we've got sort of the other areas of Riverbend, the loop along the southern boundary, collectively another 350, another 250, and then South Piramai up to another 1,000 houses. Some of those are already zoned, some of them are not, so there's a need to have a pipeline of urban growth projects coming through the system and providing the opportunity for development to occur. And the national policy statement basically saying that if council doesn't provide meets all of the demand that's coming for housing, we have to be very receptive to private development options coming in and promoting other opportunities for growth. So what was the question again? Do we have enough land for 500 odd houses at the moment? We do, so it's already zoned and serviced, Parklands, Te Awa kind of thing. Those are the ones which have the least impediments to putting houses on. The mission's sort of sitting there ready to go as well. And then the next ones would actually have to do some work in terms of structure planning, rezoning to move the land forward. But as I said, there's always an opportunity for private developers to come along and put their own cases forward. Part of that policy statement requirements is looking at specific needs for Māori housing, and there's new legislation which is coming in to replace the RMA, which I'll talk to next as well, but there's a lot more emphasis on providing for the individual sectors of growth, not just saying that you've got 1,000 houses that can go in one location. It's actually, well, what locations, what price points, and what sectors of the market are you catering for? So that's granulated down to the Māori, retirement villages, RSE workers. There's a whole lot of stuff going on there. So it's really busy, it's a big space, and there's constantly a need to keep reviewing and updating and looking at the issue, plus the intensification side of things as well.
Complex. Sorry, last one is the industrial area, Ngāwatoto. Did you say that there might be further expansion there, or?
Under HPUDs, it's identified as a potential growth node. It doesn't have council-provided full reticulated services there, so it's effectively requiring developer-led solutions and the provision of infrastructure to support it. There's been a lot of historical work done over the years by some developers looking at it. It tends to come up quite costly, and there's some significant issues, particularly with flooding, inundation, and sort of stormwater disposal, because it's very flat, very difficult to dispose of stormwater.
I just want to make the point that it seems like we're like putting industrial areas next to estuaries, which are very from a cultural side of view, but ecological, it's really important. So if there is going to be an expansion, then there needs to be robust environmental considerations about the stormwater and odour and all of those things. So if we can not look there, that would be good.
We're not actively looking there at the moment, so it is still a potential option in the mix. It's probably a very difficult option, and really with that sub-regional industrial strategy with Hastings, those big sort of industries that you mentioned, we just sort of collectively see the fact that they're better catered for within the Hastings district, and that Napier sort of kind of becomes more sort of just bespoke industries which have less impacts and environmental effects. But we are dealing with legacy issues, and they do have existing use rights, and so industries that are legally established have the right to continue to operate. So.
Kia ora. You have to wait for
We can pass this with the district plan together. Oh, kia ora. I don't have any further questions on this one. You don't have any comments regarding the spatial
No.
picture? Kia ora. Oh, well, I'll put that the Māori Committee recommends that the council resolve that the committee's recommendations be adopted. Do I have a second that, please? Kia ora whai, Adrian. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 All those against, please say Carl. Kua mana. Are you speaking to the district plan too?
Yes,
Thank you.
I am. Just a quick update on this particular item. Subsequent to its drafting and being through the Future Napier Committee, Central Government has released part of the legislation referred to in that document. It's a draft for consultation on the Natural and Built Environments Bill. So there's a bit of an additional part of the presentation is looking at the legislation which was presented to the council yesterday in a workshop, and they asked the fact that the same presentation or a similar presentation at least be presented to this committee, just to sort of update them. So I'll start with the district plan, which is as per what the Future Napiers Committee was, but then once we get onto the legislation update, there's a bit of an update around it. So yes, district plan, if you could, it's a once in a sort of a semi-generation, but 10, 15-year time frame in terms of allowing a whole new regulatory document to be developed. So the district plan is a core council document. I would argue probably the most important council document with its cumulative effects over time and impacts. It's mandatory and it has been since about the 1920s to have some form of a district plan. So you can't exist without one. And the current requirement is it has to be an e-plan. It's no longer a paper-based document. It has to be an e-plan. So everything now is searchable through the internet. So that's a requirement. So I don't have a document that we present anymore. You just have to go online and look through it yourself, which is a bit tricky sometimes. The government's put a national template together for how they look, so it's standardising the district plans. In the past, everybody went on and did their own thing. Now it actually has to follow a formula and so a set prescribed way of looking and how it's presented. It has a hierarchical sort of relationship with legislation. So the RMA at the moment is the legislation that flows down to national policy statements, national environmental standards, and then the regional policy statement of this council, or the regional council, is we have to give effect to those directives and the objectives within those documents. The district plan must be consistent or at least have regard to other documents such as iwi management plans. And what it does is set objectives, policies, rules and assessment criteria for managing activities. And what it really does is try and balance the need to obtain consent or not to obtain consent, so to try and permit activities as much as possible, but then actually put a stake in the ground at what scale do they need to obtain resource consent to deviate from those permitted rules or envelope of building development options and activities. And it also just gives an opportunity to give realign to strategic directions of councils. So as you're well aware, one of the key priorities or the key priority for this council is water. So it's an opportunity to sort of try and bring any ability to sort of influence positive outcomes for water quality and the treatment and dealing with water into that district plan. It's not the only way you're ever going to solve any problems, but it does contribute cumulatively over time. Go to the next slide. So when we did the district plan, we set our own little framework for how we were going to sort of draft the plan, and we set some strategic outcomes for how that would go, which is the greenfield growth in the hills, a premier regional park in Ahuriri, which was the old council lagoon farm, having city living supporting a vibrant CBD, leveraging our heritage, having great urban areas and this regional approach to industry. And then cascading below that, we sort of set key principles. Those key principles come out of city vision, and then some objectives for how all of the other provisions in the plan should fall within them, but should follow that same theme. So it's a massive process. A district plan review is not something to be taken lightly. It's not something that's going to be done overnight, and parts of it are slower than other parts, and a couple of things go quite quickly, but not many. So anyway, you start off having a look at the whole basis of their environment again. You commission reports on all the key issues, such as sort of identifying cultural landscapes, significant natural areas, everything that's set by the government in that regional policy statement. We worked internally within the council to try and sort of get everybody in the council to understand what the district plan is, what role it has in trying to support their activities and getting a commonality and a common feeling within the council. That took a while as well. It's not a quick role. And then we move out into the external workshops with key stakeholders and sort of get all those people together and to start inputting in. The key stakeholders are the ones with the biggest skin in the game in terms of the district plan. And then we prepared a lot of discussion documents around the public good issues. It's easy dealing with the private good, if you like, but once you get to the public good, everybody has an interest in heritage, everybody has an interest in indigenous biodiversity, everybody has an interest in landscapes, and so it's trying to get a balance between those issues. We've had drop-in sessions. They were COVID interrupted, which didn't help our process as well, but we sort of talked to sort of the key stakeholders of that, got that feedback, and then just worked with council to sort of get that an agreement to sort of make sure that we're staying in alignment with that agreed framework that we adopted for our plan. So if you go to the next slide. So the big issues, well, it is these public good impacts and how they impact on private property. And so there's a list there: heritage, landscapes, significant natural areas. Both the port and the airport are wanting to have noise contours where they can't contain noise within their own boundaries, so they actually intrude into other people's properties. We want to have a good urban design fabric, so there's I guess, a little bit more emphasis in determining or having resource consents to get sort of that urban design input. We're trying to sort of improve amenity and the safety, and so one of the sort of issues that may sort of raise some submissions is trying to lower front fences, just so that you have more health and safety and more willingness of people to sort of walk around without feeling like they're sort of, and building a sense of community, rather than sort of having sort of everybody having their own little tower. More working on around earthworks, stormwater, and the issue that we still haven't quite landed is the sites of significance to Māori. So that's another little bit of a work stream that we'll be doing in parallel with our engagement on the draft district plan. Yeah, so this is the steps of doing it. So we're hoping to notify that draft plan on the 6th of August, and that's just contingent on council adopting it at the next council meeting. I think there's a high-level comms and engagement plan attached to the report. We're going to have a period of comments for 6 weeks, closing on the 17th of September. And then what we'd do is prepare a summary of those comments and then workshop with the council to discuss them and the recommendations of how to deal with them. We'd look to respond to submitters and then amend that district plan to reflect the agreed approach, and then move to the next step, which is the proposed plan. So I've got this other presentation on the legislation reform, but if you've got any questions on the district plan, it might be timely to sort of raise them
now. Any questions regarding the district plan? Kia ora, Dean. Thanks for another kōrero on the report. Do you have an engagement plan leading into the next few processes with mana whenua?
Yeah, we've been engaging with mana whenua right through the process and all the entities. We take advice from Māori and previous cultural advisors, and I guess where we haven't quite landed some of them is with Mana Ahariri and Manga Harutu Tagatu Trust haven't quite sort of landed in terms of the sites of significance and an agreement around that. So there is a process that is in play, and we're always open for opportunities to sort of follow any other options that anybody's willing to sort of raise. So there is a bit of a plan, but we don't have I guess not a formal sort of written thing, I guess, in terms of exactly how and when, because we need to be fluid in terms of taking opportunities as they arise, I guess.
You definitely acknowledge that engagement has happened, so that's awesome. Just that mindful that the district plan is a beast, and you may need a strategy around the most effective way to engage your whānau, because I know it's a lot to sift through, and if you've got effective ways to engage, and that could potentially mean like actually calling the whānau in for a whole day and there's butcher paper and actually working through it on the day, or I'm sure you'll come up with all the strategies, but really is there a strategy, and potentially it might be good to create one.
Yeah, I totally agree. We probably just sort of haven't been pushing it too hard at the moment because we've been having to get the actual plan, what we have got, into a form that we can actually get notified, and it is, as you say, a beast, and that's a massive work, amount of work involved in doing that. So once we've got the draft plan notified, we can sort of see and free up opportunities to sort of get stuck back into the areas that we need to further work on, really.
Also approaching each of the marae and spending a day there would be also a good approach, which I'm sure would be a part of the strategy anyway, but I'll put that plug in.
Yep.
Kia ora. This is the last one.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Just from our point of view, we're very open to the ideas coming the other way of how we best do it as well. It is hard and it's kind of painful going through the district plan. We're very aware of that too. So, and the heavy agenda that mana whenua have got on all sorts of things. So you're very much welcome those ideas. Keep dialogue on that, on how we can do it.
Cool, thanks. Just note, I don't think we've been engaged in last I think it was about 2 years ago since the last time we were engaged on this one, but just following on from Te Kaha's comments, I just see in the committee's recommendation, note that the sites of significance to Māori chapter has not been included in the draft plan, and this chapter is progressing in parallel to consultation on the draft plan. Of just who will be involved with that, and is this discussion happening at the moment, or?
It has been ongoing for the whole process of the review of the draft district plan. We'll be looking to work with our cultural advisors to develop a new plan, but certainly from my understanding, we've sort of got agreement in principle as to where we are now with Tai Whenua and Ngāti Parao. We don't have final sign-off from Mana Ahariri or MTT, so they're the ones that we need to put more emphasis into and put a bit of a work plan around that. So, as I say, we've been busy trying to get the whole draft plan done in its full breadth and entirety, but we do know that there's a few work streams that we sort of have to put more effort into, and hopefully now we will have the opportunity to get stuck into that.
Kia ora. Thank you, Dean. We're just running out of time, but I'll just move this, and then Adrian has to leave, and then we can move on to the RMA reform.
Yep.
So I'll put that the Māori Committee recommends that the Council resolve that the Committee's recommendations be adopted. Do I have a second for that, please? Kia ora whaia, Adrian. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against, please say Carl. Ko mana. Thank you. I'll just, I know Adrian has to leave, so this RMA reform is just an update, isn't it? Or?
It is. It's a big one, I guess, and it's a fast-moving one. But yeah, so I can probably skip through it pretty quickly if you...
Yeah, we'll just allow Adrian to leave if you need to leave, yeah.
Yeah. I'll go back to work.
Yeah, cool.
He's going to join me.
Okay then. Okay then, so we will skip our entity updates for this Māori Committee hui, but I'll just close us up with... Oh yeah, I'll just close this up that way that Adrian can leave. Nā reira, kia inoi tātou. Ka whakiiria te tapu me te mauri o a tātou mahi me a tātou kōrero. Ki te hekinga o te whare nei, ki reira iri aki ai a tai hoa, kia tikinga mai anō, kia mau, kia ita, kia kore ai ngaro, kia pupuri, tūturu ofi te whakamaua, kia teina. Haumi e hui e.
Ai, ki.
Kia ora. Thank you, Adrian.
Kia ora.
It's good to see you again. We'll catch you. Oh, Kagi did it. All right, then we'll whip into it, eh?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, happy with that, yep. So only take a couple minutes, eh?
Yep.
Tell the RMA.
It's only a really big thing.
As the committee will know, we have a government that's very keen on reforming a lot of local government and legislation, associated legislation. Three Waters, the health boards are being reformed. There's lots of reform going on, but one of the biggest ones is the RMA reform. Cross-party agreement that the RMA is going to be null and void and replaced with three pieces of legislation. So the key one, and the one that we've got an opportunity to comment on at the moment, only a very brief window of opportunity, is the Natural and Built Environments Bill, and it's not the whole bill itself, it's only a little small portion of it. It's sort of a snapshot just giving us an idea of where it's likely to go. So that's the one I'll be focusing and talking about today. There's a Strategic Planning Act that accompanies it, and there's a Climate Change Adaptation Act. So the Resource Management Act is going to be replaced by three pieces of legislation. And as I say, there's an exposure draft of this Natural and Built Environment Bill, but the comments have to be received by government by the 4th of August, which was basically didn't allow any normal council processes to operate to get a consistent or a coordinated approach to trying to get a submission in. So we've just had a quick workshop with our councillors yesterday, and they suggested we present to you guys as well. And I'll just quickly take you through where a little bit about the Act, the Replacement Act, and where the council have agreed to lodge comments on it. So if you can go to... So the Natural and Built Environments Act has this national planning framework. And when I talked about a template for district plans before, this is the next iteration and a lot more constriction in terms of flexibility for how things can be done. So the National Planning Framework sets integrated direction on matters of national significance and where consistency is desirable. And that could be the whole country, but it could also just be parts of the country. And there's also regulations going to be set through that bill, so there won't be the rules in the plan, it'll be national rules setting environmental limits. So if you think about these matters of national significance, think about the national policy statements that they have at the moment. They're the sort of issues that will come through, sort of natural hazards, productive soils, all the national sort of criteria for determining significant natural areas. Environmental limits are bottom lines, and they're going to be either set nationally or sometimes devolved down to the regional level to allow regional input into those, setting those limits. And they're both quantitative and qualitative. They sort of typically deal with the regional council issues, air quality, water levels, nitrogen, phosphorus, where you can actually have measurable criteria, but there will be also some qualitative input into it, and I'll touch on them a bit further. The National Planning Framework sets environmental outcomes, a move away from just having effects as a sort of criteria for what you're dealing with, but setting outcomes that are what's expected to come from developing plans under this sort of legislation, and they deal with that quality of air, fresh water, estuaries, soils, ecological integrity, outstanding natural features, landscapes, housing, supply. Greater emphasis now on housing is coming through in this bill, so it's natural and built environment. As it's currently drafted, it doesn't really get into the built environment in a major way, so there's probably got a lot more work to come on that space and when the next iteration comes. There's going to be some help to resolve conflicts between outcomes because they're not all mutually exclusive. They do overlap and conflict with each other. And there will be a setting of strategic direction. And then underlying it within the bill, there's a precautionary approach. So if you don't really understand or don't know, the expectation is that your approval wouldn't be given. So what is it really doing? It's going to centralise control over planning. It's looking to only have 14 regional plans based around the regional councils. So there would be no district plans, no territorial authority having plans themselves. And it would be set up with a regional planning committee. And the details that we do know is that there'd be one person representing the Crown, which would be appointed by the Minister of Conservation, one person for each local authority within the region, which is a bit confusing for our region because Hawke's Bay region includes little bits of Rangitikei and Taupo. And so as it stands, they would have equal representation on this committee as per Napier and Hastings, which doesn't really make sense given the fact that they've probably only got a handful of residents within the region. And there will be mana whenua reps, and the number of that and how they will be appointed is to be confirmed, so that's a bit of a mystery at this stage. And the purpose of that regional planning committee is to maintain that plan, approve or reject recommendations from an independent hearings panel. So the plan will be developed by the regional planning committee, but the actual hearings of submissions will be done by an independent panel. So there's an arm's length or further arm's length away from the local communities in terms of having input into that as a sort of a decision-making part. And it also has the opportunity to set these environmental limits if it has discretion to do so. Mana whenua has a much greater role and recognition in the new legislation. There's a significantly enhanced recognition of mana whenua. And the whole purpose of the Act is to enable te oranga o te taiao to be upheld as part of the overall purpose of the Act. And the other big part of it is it actually gives effect to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. It used to have regard to, but under the RMA, so there's a significantly enhanced presence and recognition of the Māori. There's specific environmental outcomes which address Māori issues as well. So the housing aims, the aspirations around providing papakāinga and the like. There's protection around customary rights if they are protected through any other sort of mechanism. And there's an ability to have some sort of active management of cultural and heritage landscapes. And that management would be proportional to the cultural value of those sort of assets. Environmental limits are both qualitative and quantitative, and the qualitative includes Mataranga Māori. And what have we got there? Reps on the Regional Planning Committee. And as I say, there are numbers and processes to be confirmed yet, but there's no guidance on how any conflicts between the different mana whenua groups would be resolved, if there are any. So there will be some representation.
No magic formula for that one.
No. But, so there's a representation, but whether they have all agreement that that is the adequate representations is obviously an issue that needs to be worked through. So this is what the council's given us direction that we're going to quickly sort of try and get some sort of a submission onto this bill on behalf of Napier City Council. We focused on the Napier flavours as we saw them and put some suggestions to the council yesterday. So they sort of given us approval to sort of retain some sort of local input into the preparation of a plan. And so that would either be plans to be endorsed by each partner council before release, and the partner councils being able to accept or reject recommendations as per the Auckland Unitary Plan, or to have some sort of involvement in that plan preparation itself. And then also just support the national planning framework to address these nationally significant issues, or where consistency is beneficial, e.g. for human health and criteria for determining significant natural areas. But I guess the contra thing is the fundamental thing is to try and maintain some sort of local input into the legislation, into the plans that come out of the legislation. If you go to the next slide. Another area is supporting these clear outcomes. The outcomes are sort of, we believe, better than sort of just trying to sort of split effects. It's too sort of subjective to tell when an effect has more than de minimis effect, or whatever the latest terminology is. But we believe that, and councils agreed, that the balancing of those conflicts between the outcomes is best done at the local level. Needs to be greater emphasis on the built environment, urban design, wellbeing component of the bill. It's not present there at the moment. And some concerns around the reliance on the plan making for determining the outcomes and the environmental limits, because the move is to try and reduce reliance on resource consents. So less resource consents, which means a lot more permitted activities, a lot more prohibited activities. They don't allow very much discretion sitting in the middle if you're not going to have resource consents, and resource consents allow you to look at each site individually and the unique circumstances applying to it, and to be able to lodge conditions which mitigate individuals' effects. So if you're not going to have that, then you need to have a very enabling permitted activities, because the assumption is you'll go straight to prohibited, which means if you have very enabling permitted activities, it won't necessarily result in good outcomes. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out yet, but there will be some resource consents, but less reliance on them is the intention of the Act. Yeah, this is a common feedback from all people looking at it. They need to clarify the links between those three acts. They have only just released a little snapshot of the exposure draft of one part of it, so we don't know how it relates to the other two acts. And the big elephant in the room, as always, is there's nothing about the funding for how you're going to provide for growth. So if a regional planning committee is going to determine the fact that the cities or the area or the region is going to grow here, there and where, how does it get funded? And the further the plan making function is from local council, the less accountability there is for financial impacts, because if the Napier City Council, for example, continues to exist, it will continue to rate pay people, but that presumably a lot of that money would then have to go off towards this provision of infrastructure, but without having a lot of input into the local community to determine where it should grow. Unclear how the Strategic Planning Act will align with funding, but it is going to determine those growth. And then there's also this that Climate Change Adaptation Act and the Natural Built Environments Act are going to look to be able to extinguish existing use rights, and this is all about resilience, moving communities away from areas of risk. But that's a massive and big issue, and how you do go about it, and how and who will be providing the funding for that. I don't know how that would be, because that really is a local issue, but it will be being addressed at a regional level. So it's making sure that local input is still able to be had into these really big decisions. Next one. Oh, that's it.
I thank you for presenting those three kaupapa. I'll just open up if you want to comment or ask any questions. No comments or questions from me.
Well, that's a big kaupapa, eh? So is
Yep.
the governance structure, just so it's clear in my mind, that there's going to be a regional planning committee, and then there's going to be appointed persons from each of the regions. So are they going to be acting as like the governance of the three different pieces of legislation, or just the first one that you talked about, the environment?
Presumably all of them, but we don't know, because we don't know what the other two legislation, even how they look in any way yet. So we can only look at the Natural and Built Environments Act. So It doesn't have to be elected representatives onto that committee. It can be an appointed person onto that committee. So it could be a technical person who's actually sitting onto that committee, or it could be an elected person. So, you know, it could be the mayors and chairs, or it could actually be a technical person who's potentially better qualified to sort of deal with the technical issues associated with it. And it could be the same person nominated from different councils, so you don't actually have to have one per council. It could be an agreement that, hey, everybody's happy with one person to be on there.
So for the council's roles, the different councils, will they all be working still in the same area but operating off the one plan? So Napier will have to take into effect this plan, Wairoa. And so what would the regional council be doing? So there's still core functions that sit in other pieces of legislation that you still have to do the bread and butter on, and then plus this piece of legislation? Is that...
Yeah, it gets complicated. Yeah. Effectively, I guess what they're looking at doing is creating 14 unitary authorities. So they retain functions of regional councils and the territorial authorities. The territorial authorities, and what the government's proposing, is taking three waters out of the mix of the territorial authorities. If they take the planning function out of the territorial authorities, it doesn't leave a very robust council function behind. It's sort of just dealing, I guess, at the sort of smaller scale levels, kind of like the local board issues in terms of Auckland councils. But the functions of regional council and the functions of the city councils would be dealt with through that unitary plan, the regional planning committee, and there's an expectation that councils will fund staff onto the technical group that supports that regional planning committee, but probably would still need to retain some staff within their own organisation to advocate for the local issues via this regional planning committee.
So a large function of the city councils, of all the councils, will be merged into one unitary council?
Yeah, well, the Three Waters are going off, and well, this is what the Three Waters reform is a separate council-controlled organisation, so it's not really council functions directly per se. But yeah, the regional council would take over the majority of the functions, and what role the territorial authorities would have is still to be determined, and the government has commissioned a specific piece of work looking at what is the future of local government. You would have thought they might have done that to start with, but they're doing it now towards the end of the process, so collectively, I guess in another year or two, we'll have a bit more clarity as to what future the local or the territorial authorities will have, like Hastings District and Napier City.
If I can just chip in there, I think what Dean's doing is reading the tea leaves a little bit, because with that last point, they're doing another piece of work, doing an inquiry as to the future of local government. So we don't actually know how it's going to evolve, but what Dean's saying, this is what it looks like is happening, even though we're only dealing with one of the three acts, and there's all these other things going on as well. So it's really up in the air. But it looks like a regional structure is going to be the dominant structure.
And how will that unitary council engage with the three entities, or the one entity that will be looking after our area for the Three Waters? Will they be an independent company, and then you kind of still issue resource consents to that company and around the Three Waters, or?
Well, I guess the legislation, and there always will have to be a land use piece of legislation, so there will be either permitted activities, prohibited activities, or some form of resource consents in there. So, yep, so if you have a separate company, it would require, and it needed resource consent, it would have to apply to the council who's administering that. So it looks like 14 regional plans. I guess we don't know what the makeup is, but it would appear that it would be a regional council making decisions around those regional.
So they'll still hold the regulatory side of things, where the company that looks after the three waters has to still meet those regulatory kind of requirements, and then they apply to the unitary for those consents or for the water takes and all these things.
Most
Is that
likely,
right,
yeah. Most likely. I mean, as I say, we don't have much to work on, but that certainly seems to be where it's heading, or that's the direction of travel.
So the Three Waters company isn't owned by the Unitary Council at all. It's completely separate.
Yeah.
They have the function of looking after the Three Waters.
None of that's been determined yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that they've put out something on legislation without the actual, without actually working out how the structural elements of councils are going to work, and all they've got is that hearing part. Yeah.
Chair, just in response to the request earlier, I have sent to the Māori committee detail around what the structure of those entities might look like and the interfaces with council. So that's in your mailbox. There's a high-level document that's still
The water one.
Yeah, the water ones. You know, that's still, as you say, not defined yet. It's a work in progress.
It's all draft.
But that might be helpful to understand some of those interrelationships. There's a lot to be worked through.
Pick up on Nothing else? Do you want to set up
right
a
now.
one-on-one?
Next time. Yeah. If we can just have that as an agenda item, just an update on that, because I mean, in a few years' time, I mean, if potentially the council might not be in this function and this committee might not be here, and so it's actually quite important that we just probably keep our hands on the pulse on what's happening. So if we can have that as a consistent agenda item, if there's any updates on what's going on in that space, it'll be helpful.
And that's good. It's a fast-moving space, and nobody knows where we're going at this stage. So it should become clearer over the next year or two. But just to give you a quick update, so what we're proposing to do is to sort of get a memo circulated to our councillors and also the committee members here. That'll come through hopefully on Monday, and we'd need feedback on the content of that submission, if there is any, by Friday, so that we can actually lodge a submission on behalf of the council before the 4th of August. So not a lot of time, but that's the only thing that we can actually feasibly do in terms of the process going forward.
They'd say you might come out Monday, you need a turnaround by Friday.
Yeah, that would just be a memo showing the content of what the submission would form, get feedback from that, and then lodge a submission.
Cowboy. Oh, well, that concludes our hui for today e te whānau. Tēnei te mihi nui a te kia koutou katoa. We've already closed out with a karakia. Nā reira, kia ora, cup of tea time.
Kia ora.